let's get into the Bulls, man. The Bulls, man, there's a lot of stuff we can say about the Bulls. I personally have been disgusted with this franchise for the last couple of years. It just kind of feels like they're just there. And finally got rid of Zach LaVine last week. 3-team trade, sent him over to Sacramento. Man, they got their own draft pick back. But I think the thing that disgusted a lot of the fans was what AK said in his press conference. And it kind of doesn't feel like he has a plan. What's your opinion on everything that went down last week in the deadline? And what does AK even really have a plan, in your opinion?
You know what, man? There was a lot of interesting things, and I'm with you in terms of just trying to figure out what the direction of this franchise is. But this is something that we've known coming into the season, especially where they've come out and said that they're tired of being in the middle. And we know this, right? It's either you're in heaven in the NBA or you're in hell. Like, you don't want to be in purgatory, right? And so you have a franchise that have been in purgatory for the past few seasons, and there felt like it was no way out, because making the play-in, yeah, cool, you get the golf clap, pat on the back, you made the play-in, but we're coming from a city, and just with the history of this franchise, just being from the city in general, where we don't want to make consolation prizes. Like, that's not cool. Like, that's, you're just playing kick the can down the road. But you have to have a situation where you just rip the Band-Aid off. And this is something that I've said when I subbed in for my man Jason Goff for Bulls pre and post, something that I said on our show, the Chicago Lead on the Chicago Sports Network, is that you have to move forward. If the plan is to build towards the future, then rip the Band-Aid off, and you do that by making moves by trading Zach LaVine. And that's what I thought was going to be the first domino, which was the first domino of this franchise moving forward towards the future. But you hit a kind of rut when you get to a situation when you can't move off of Nikola Vucevic. And from what I've been told from Bulls insider for Chicago Sports Network and Casey Johnson, was that the Bulls were trying to fire off as many deals and options as they could with Nico, and trying to get them over to Golden State. So just things on the other teams and at that negotiation table that fell through. And obviously with the Warriors, them going into the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes and getting those sweepstakes. I'm not going to say they won the sweepstakes, because we're still trying to figure out how that's going to look. I have my own opinions on that situation in Golden State, even though some people will look at that first career game with Jimmy in the Warriors uniform against the Bulls. It's like, oh, this might work. Just kind of give it some time and let that thing fully marinate and materialize, because you got two alphas in that locker room, and Jimmy and Draymond vocally. Those are the alphas that I'm talking about that are going to butt heads at some point. So you don't move Nico. You don't move Josh Giddey, who's going to be a restricted free agent this upcoming offseason. And from some rumor reports of the dollar amount that he's trying to go after, I've heard some rumor reports of him trying to go after the Jalen Suggs deal from the Orlando Magic. And we know that Suggs, before the season, signed that 5-year, $150 million deal. That's a lot of bread for a dude that hasn't been able to accomplish what Jalen Suggs has been able to accomplish in his time in the NBA. You know, it's been a short time so far, but still, you have question marks to see which lane you want to choose with this group. And I think the great thing that AK and his front office has on their side is that they have a lot of trade assets. Like, I know Lonzo got the extension for a 2 years, $20 million deal, but it's very contract friendly for teams. And if you want to make that a trade asset, you can. You have Io if you want to move off of Io. You have Kobe White if you want to move off of him. Those are the options that they're going to have going into the offseason. But again, that press conference, initially listening to it, I'm like, okay, when it got to AK mentioning the play-in and playoffs, I'm like, what is the real direction where you want this team to go? Because we know if you're trying to make a push to get into the play-in or playoffs, that puts you in a tougher spot to try and get that number 1 overall pick or top 3 pick or top 5 pick. But when he sat down after his press conference with Casey Johnson, he kind of clarified what he was saying a little bit and tried to do some damage control with it, and saying that, you know, he wouldn't be opposed if this team finds himself in the play-in or playoffs. Like, I get that thinking, because they've always said this season that they're not trying to compromise the integrity of competition. And I get that. Like, the Bulls are not just going to go out and flat out tank like we've seen with the Washington Wizards or the Charlotte Hornets, or even at times with the Portland Trail Blazers. So they're going to stay competitive. Like, if they're trying to tank, they have the wrong head coach and Billy Donovan. Like, Billy's just not built like that, right? And just knowing his basketball background and his coaching background, he's not going to be a part of anything like that. So if they find themselves in that situation, it's like, okay, well, cool. That helps them learn. But at the same time, if you're moving forward and the whole thought process is building towards the future, then you can have a game on Saturday where you're competitive. You have moments where you could possibly win, and then ultimately a better team goes and snatches that game away from you. So it's interesting to see what moves forward with this Bulls team I believe they have 29 games left. They're 22-31. They're going to have the Detroit Pistons on back-to-back nights starting tomorrow and Wednesday. That weird kind of like home type of matchup where we've seen the NBA the past couple of seasons. Yeah, it's just weird. I'm still trying to make sense of that. I get it, trying to give guys more days off as we get ready to head into the All-Star break. But still, you have to have a clear direction of who you want to be and where you want to go. So it feels like they have an idea of what that is, but at the same time, you have to show everyone, and when I mean everyone, fans, like this is the direction that we're moving in. We're moving towards the future. And it got kind of murky when you had that press conference with Arturas Karnisovas.
Definitely. And also big shout out to friend of the program, Mr. Jason Go. Go ahead, man.
So the way that the team is shaped right now, like, do you think it's a possibility that the Bulls can get a top 4 pick? We know that at least at the beginning of this draft, you could possibly get you a franchise altering player, possibly. Everybody want to jag for flag or be huff for flag, but you also have other people at the beginning of this draft. What does that look like for the Bulls? Have they done enough to not tank, but to be terrible enough to get in position?
Yeah, I'm looking at this where you have the remaining 29 games. And for me, looking at Nikola Vucevic, you weren't able to move him before the trade deadline. So as a solid to Vuce and out of respect for him, it would make sense for them to take some of his minutes away so that you're moving into the offseason. One would possibly, obviously, you can't protect a player's health. Like, injuries are going to happen. But at the same time, if you're trying to move for that top 5, top 3, or number 1 overall pick position for the 2025 draft, then it would just make sense for me to see what you have with some of these younger guys. Like feels like 50 guards on this team, and they're going to play a lot of small ball. And I think it's just going to be a disservice for Vuce to have them on that floor trying to develop chemistry with some of these new guys, and Trey Jones and Kevin Huerter. Zach Collins didn't even play on Saturday. So I think you give him more opportunity to get more minutes on the court, along with Jalen Smith, who I feel has been one of the more consistent players on this Bulls team off of the bench and in his role. So shout out to Jalen Smith, real good dude off the court as well. So you look at that, and bang, you want to make sure that you better your position of getting a spot in the top 5 or the top 3 or the number 1 overall pick. But I go back to last season with the Atlanta Hawks, and this is kind of going towards that. If the Bulls made the play-in situation, and could they still get the number 1 overall pick? Well, it helped out for Atlanta in that situation where they did make the play-in and they still got the number 1 overall pick. Now, a lot of things had to go their way for them to get the number 1 overall pick, so don't get it twisted. But at the same time, you have another situation years ago where we talk about our very own and D Rose, right? With the Bulls, I think it was like a 1.8% chance going into the draft lottery that the Bulls had of getting the number 1 overall pick. And then, look, the basketball gods blessed us, and we had Poole coming back to the city. So you could have that situation where, depending on what the odds are, you still could find yourself in that ideal spot, the ideal landing spot, which for me is going to be top 5, maybe even top 10, because some people out there are saying that this draft class isn't as heavy or as deep as some think. And I think that's just cap. I think it's hot takes, because I think you get a lot of players out there that can really hoop. Now, when it comes to franchise changing players, I think that's where the conversation gets interesting, Bang, where you can find yourself in the top 5 spot and definitely get a guy that's going to be a franchise changing player. Top 3 for sure. Of course, obviously, we know this number 1 overall is going to be Cooper Flag, unless somebody just, when you get into these workouts and how it's all smoke and mirrors with these agents and different information comes out about Ace Bailey starting to overtake Cooper Flag for that number 1 overall spot. I wouldn't be surprised if Ace starts to get that type of energy when we get there, just because he's 6'10" and can score his ass off. Still has some things that he has to work on defensively. But again, you can find yourself in that position to get that top pick or that top 3 pick without trying to go out and just tank. And again, like this franchise is not going to pull a Washington Wizards or Charlotte Hornets and just like, yo, hey, it's a free for all. Go do what y'all do. Get buckets. We don't care. We're trying to lose. That's just not the MO of this franchise. But still, I think you're going to see competitive basketball just because of who their coach is and trying to set them up for success. But at the end of the day, looking at this roster, even with Zach LaVine on this roster and the chemistry they still had situations where defensively, whether it was giving up points in the paint or when it comes to fast break points or points off turnovers, they're one of the worst in the NBA. So you're going to have yourself in situations where no matter what it is, no matter how hard you're playing, you just can't make up for size. And the Bulls, despite them being one of the better rebounding teams in the league, are still undersized. But then also, too, other teams just got dudes on there, like, top 3, top 2 dudes on their squads where it's going to be tough. And you're talking about going into that situation after the All-Star break where those games get real for teams that are trying to position themselves seeding-wise to avoid certain teams or just have that playoff road be a little bit easier. It's just going to come to a head where it's like, all right, you can try as much as you want, but the best is still going to rise to the top. And so that's the situation that they'll find themselves in, which could ultimately a spot in the top 5, top 3, or maybe even number 1 overall.
And you put it best, man, when you're talking about like getting a Cooper Flag or a Bailey. I think it's something that the fan base needs, because the thing about the Bulls that I think a lot of people forget is this is a fan base that just, if you give them something, it's going to reignite the entire city and the fan base. And if you can give them a Cooper Flag or a Bailey, that's going to put some energy back in the UC that we ain't seen in probably that little first 2-3 months of the DeMar, Lonzo, Zach thing before everybody got hurt. And what faith do you think the fan base should have in AK and them? Let's just say they get blessed with a Cooper Flag or a Bailey, that they can actually do something with them. Because even though Poole's injuries was the main reason they didn't get to the promised land, it's not like he was giving him another scorer. Like they gave him Richard Hamilton, who was way past his prime after they lost the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, I'm with you. Kind of hard to regain the trust of certain fans in the city when it comes to just, and I get it, right? Because again, you're dealing with an iconic franchise, right? No matter where you view this Bulls team since the D Rose years or since the Jordan years, this is still a worldwide logo across the world, no matter what sport it is. People know that Chicago Bulls logo. So there are some people that have expectations of where this franchise should be, and that's a nod to Michael Jordan, what he was able to do, and even the players before him to really get the Bulls on the map. But we know that Mike ultimately put the Bulls on the biggest worldwide map. So you're going to have people that it's going to be tough to have them believing in what this front office can do. And you have a guy in AK that had his time in Denver and was able to craft some things with that Nuggets team and that franchise to ultimately put them on the path to win an NBA championship, although he was gone when that happened. But you have to try and regain that trust by making these moves that you're making now, right? You had to move off Zach. And I think with them moving off of Zach's contract, because that was a whole lot of money that Zach was due, you find a team that can get that. And I know people are saying, well, they traded Zach and they got their top 10 pick back. And, you got something back that was already yours. Like, look, at the end of the day, come on, man. Like beggars can't be choosers, right? Yep. So, I mean, you get your top 10 pick back. Cool. You get Zach's contract off your books. I think that's one of the best case scenarios, knowing just how it's been a lot of swing and misses for this Wolves front office and trying to move off of Zach's contract for the past couple of seasons. And the same thing with Vooch the past season or two. So there is forward movement there. And you can see that they have an idea and a vision of where they want to go. But it's going to be another domino effect, right, as we get through the rest of the season, as we get into the offseason and seeing what these trades are, again, with the trade assets that they have throughout this roster with some of these team-friendly deals, along with trying to get, and hopefully, again, like we talked about, Scott, like, look, you praying to whatever, if you got a Michael Jordan shrine in your closet with candles lit or something like that, or 72 and 10 Bulls or D-Rose shrine, whatever it is that you're praying to every day to hope that the basketball gods can bless the Bulls with a top 3 pick or number 1 overall pick, then if it works out in the Bulls' favor in that way, now you're talking about, like you said, different type of energy coming into the offseason. And now you're looking at Chicago possibly being a destination when you have this, who, in my opinion, just talking to him and obviously watching them play, like this dude was a dog. Like Modest is built different, and like he's a hooper, like for real. Like even with the down to the tattoo that I believe that's on his right leg, he got the old school. You remember the old school basketball charms with the basketball right above the rim on the net. Like that's tatted on Modest's leg, like a 20-year-old dude getting that type of tat. So seeing that is like, all right, bet. You see the energy, you see his mindset of him going out and playing. And if you can get an Ace Bailey, if you can get a Cooper Flagg, I'll even throw this name in. If you can get a Dylan Harper, and we know his family ties to this Bulls franchise with his pops, Ron Harper, and winning 3 NBA championships, doing a second three-peat with the Bulls, right? Those are all great storylines coming into the season, but also is making Chicago a destination for free agents to come to this city. Like, look, y'all got some young dogs on this team. It's going to be an exciting basketball. Of course, Billy Donovan, we've seen it this summer, or not even this summer, excuse me, this season, preach three-point attempts. I believe the Bulls are still like top 3 in the NBA in three-point attempts. Same thing in makes and percentage. So it's going to be a fun style up and down type of play that we expect and that I expect coming into this situation. And then you just throw the cherry on top with you're playing for the Chicago Bulls, right? Like, again, this city, this franchise, that logo is synonymous with greatness, right? So you have and position yourself into that. And you can get maybe 1 or 2 guys. And now you're talking about a different type of energy going into next season. Look, I know, and again, I know it took the Pistons a little while to change things around, but they built, they worked. That's true. They built and they built and they built, and now they're reaping the benefits of what they put in place because they got some young dogs on that team with Beef Stew. And I hate that damn nickname. I hate that I said Beef Stew, but with Isaiah Stewart. With Isaiah Stewart, with Jalen Duren, we know Cade is a monster, right? And they just added the pieces around them, and now Detroit is thriving just because they took the time to do the things the right way. They got the right head coach in place in JB Bickerstaff, and now they're in a position to possibly make the playoffs for the first time and just probably since the in a long time. I think 2010s had made the playoff for the Pistons back when it was just the first 8 teams. Yeah, so. There should be still trust there, but it's going to have to be a lot of making from office towards the right direction and believing in the direction that they're going to even gain more trust with this franchise, or excuse me, the fan base.
Hey, have we found out what Mark Epsley do yet, y'all?
We've been trying to figure out on this show forever, or it's Bang calls him West Side West. What does he do?
Hey, I don't know. Maybe he has like a Michael Corleone role where he like stays in the background, doesn't talk as much, but you know he's making moves behind the scenes, man.
Getting shoes, he get people shoe deals.
So cool.
Triple double hat trick, I know the code too. Ice trade, go for trade, yeah we cold too. Getting paper on these player haters, old news, money on the other line, so I'm not gonna hold you. Money on the other line, so I'm not gonna hold you. Money on the other line, so I'm not gonna hold you. Money on the other line, so I'm not